Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the high-stakes tug-of-war between shipping carriers and cargo owners over who exactly takes the blame when things go wrong at sea. You know, if you're involved in global logistics, shipping, or supply chain management in any way, understanding the rules that govern your freight isn't just some boring legal formality. It's actually a critical financial shield against disastrous losses. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the golden rule of cargo, 2, Hague rules and their escape clauses, 3, Hamburg and MTGA's strict liability, 4, the true cost of delays, and finally, number 5, when does responsibility actually end? Let's get right into it. So, who pays when your cargo sinks? I mean, it's the ultimate multi-million-dollar question in international logistics, right? Picture this. A massive cargo ship encounters brutal weather, or a catastrophic fire breaks out in the hold, and your shipping containers are just lost to the depths. Who foots the bill for that? Well, the answer completely depends on which set of rules your shipment is sailing under. And as we're going to see, the historical shift in these rules changes absolutely everything about your financial risk. Section 1. The Golden Rule of Cargo. Establishing the baseline. Before we look at how carriers avoid liability, we really need to understand the absolute baseline of what they're supposed to be doing in the first place. This is the Golden Rule, found in Article 3, Rule 2, which dictates that carriers have a fundamental duty of care for the goods they transport. The verbs here are incredibly specific. Properly and carefully load, handle, stow, carry, keep, care for, and discharge. Sounds pretty comprehensive, right? It sets up this clear expectation that when you hand over your goods, the carrier is fully responsible for keeping them safe on that journey from point A to point B. But historically, that firm promise came with some massive caveats. Which brings us to Section 2, Hague Rules, the escape clauses, or as I like to think of them, the carrier-friendly loopholes. The Hague Rules were drafted back in an era where sea voyages were incredibly perilous, and because of that, they provided carriers with a massive list of excuses to completely get out of that golden rule. Under Article 4, Rule 2, carriers can claim exemption for cargo loss due to a wildly long, honestly almost absurd list of events. If your cargo is ruined by an act of God or perils of the sea, the carrier isn't liable. A restraint by princes or some royal decree, not their problem. Padlocked ports, quarantine restrictions, strikes, lockouts, all exempt. They're even off the hook for things like latent ship defects or if they had to attempt to save property at sea. Essentially, if the carrier can point to just one of these many events, that golden rule we just talked about goes right out the window. Okay, Section 3, Hamburg and MTGA. Strict liability. This is the modern standard. Look, modern global supply chains simply couldn't survive on laws that protected carriers from absolutely everything. As international trade evolved into highly synchronized networks, cargo owners rightfully demanded real accountability. They needed a legal framework built for the modern era, not the age of sail. So, these modern rules wiped out those old loophole-heavy exemption clauses and replaced them with strict liability. The general liability rule flips the script entirely. Now, the carrier is automatically assumed guilty of the loss, damage, or delay. The only way out? They have to absolutely prove that they, their servants, and their agents took all possible measures to avoid the occurrence. The burden of proof completely shifts onto the carrier's shoulders to show their operations were flawless. Section 4. The cost of delays. Time is money. This shift in accountability becomes incredibly clear when we look at shipments that simply show up late. In today's fast-paced environments, a delayed container isn't just an inconvenience, it's a massive financial blow. Under the old Hague and Hague-Visby rules, delays only carried an implied liability. It wasn't distinctly spelled out, which led to these incredibly complex, drawn-out legal arguments over whether a delay actually breached the contract. Conversely, the modern Hamburg rules and MTGA slap carriers with direct, express liability. There's literally no ambiguity left to argue over. If they're late, they're explicitly on the hook for it. And the MTOAG Act takes it a step further. Under this act, the multimodal transport operator isn't just paying for the delay itself. They are also liable for any consequential loss or damage arising from it. Think about the financial domino effect a delay causes your business. We're talking lost peak season sales, stalled production lines, breached contracts with your own downstream buyers. Under the MTOAG Act, the carrier is held responsible for that wider ripple effect, giving you significantly more comprehensive financial protection. But what happens when delayed cargo turns into, ghost cargo? To put hard numbers on this, the modern rules give specific timelines for when you can officially declare delayed goods as completely lost. If your shipment goes missing, the Hamburg rules allow you to declare the goods officially lost after 60 consecutive days of not being located. The MTGA sets that timeline at 90 consecutive days. This provides businesses with a definitive endpoint so they can finally trigger insurance claims and get full compensation without waiting around in a perpetual state of legal limbo. So, we know how they're held liable, and we know what happens when goods are damaged or delayed. But to truly understand your risk profile, we have to ask exactly where and when these periods of responsibility begin and end. Does the clock start when the truck drops the container at the port, or only when it's dangling over the ship's hold? Let's find out in Section 5. When does responsibility end? The period of responsibility. If we trace a standard cargo journey, we can visualize the exact moments liability transfers back and forth. You have the initial acceptance of goods at the port of loading, the lengthy period of actual carriage while on board the vessel, and finally, the moment the goods are physically discharged at the destination port. The real difference between the old rules and the new rules all comes down to which exact parts of this timeline are actually covered by the carrier. Here is the crucial point. The Hague and Hague-Visby rules severely limit the carrier's liability to only the time the goods are physically on board the vessel. If your cargo is damaged while sitting on the dock waiting to be loaded, or while it's just being moved around the port yard, the ocean carrier isn't responsible. Whereas the Hamburg rules and MTGA act, kind of like a premium valet service, they extend the period of responsibility for the whole period the goods are in the carrier's charge. That means from the exact moment of acceptance at the port of loading, all the way through the voyage and right up until the goods are fully discharged at the destination port. It's comprehensive, port-to-port protection versus just onboard protection. Which brings us to the most important takeaway of this explainer. As you review your own logistics contracts, bills of lading, and shipping agreements, you really have to look closely at the fine print. You have to ask yourself, are you navigating the modern, high-stakes oceans of trade, relying on laws built for a bygone era of sailing ships and, restraints by princes? Or is your cargo truly protected by the strict port-to-port liability standards of today? Knowing the difference could honestly save your business millions.